Hi everyone, Annabelle Quintero here, your cultural wellness coach. And I just want to stop by today to talk about La Trenza de los Raíces, right? The braid, what makes Latinos the largest multiracial ethnic group in the Western Hemisphere. I cannot share that unless I also share the three pillars as Andrea Smith in her beautiful piece called Rethinking Women of Color Organizing. She really shared the most profound, I'd say, analysis of this limiting mindset called white supremacy. She shares these three pillars. And I will be using these three pillars to truly explain how white supremacy has negatively impacted Latino culture and identity. So I just want to start by saying, first of all, that we are a people that are extremely diverse. We speak many languages. We are from all over the world, and different spiritual backgrounds and practices. And depending on your region, depending on your family, you have a different lineage. So not all of us have the same ancestors or the same background. So I just want to share that because as we try to not center European and white Latinos, we also need to take into consideration and learn about the three aspects of white supremacy that have impacted our culture and identity. So the first one that I wanted to share with you, and you're going to want to write these down, is the African diaspora, which for many people who don't know, or it's the formal enslavement of African people that started in the 1500s, and unfortunately that their lives were taken from their motherland and they were put on ships, and it was the transatlantic slave trade, as they call it. The other thing, the second pillar, is colonization, the genocide of Native Americans. The third is imperialism, the forever foreigner threat. And Latino culture and identity is extremely impacted and nuanced because of these three pillars. So I'm not saying that every Latino has African blood in them. Some people identify as African, some people only identify as Indigenous, some people only identify as Spanish, that they were just born in Mexico or Chile, or it doesn't really matter the country. But that's the other thing too, is a lot of Latinos, we share the country. Oh, mi padres son de Ecuador. My parents are from Ecuador. So it gives people a sense of like the region and like the food and the reason why we speak certain Spanish and or not, or why we speak Quechua versus speaking Quechua. But I share that because many people still define themselves as a nationality, and you're not your nationality. Latinos are not just one race, and we are not just one religion. And so I share that because we are diverse, and I hope that in me sharing my own family's lineage and how cultural history has really impacted our identity today, or lack of, I'm hoping that many other people join the conversation as well. So know that this is not the end all, but this is just the beginning, so that many other people also share their lineage and their history with the world. So Latino culture and history has been impacted because of white supremacy. And for some of us who had schools that in textbooks that really go through like the colonization organization, what they really did, or even the notion that that we are only Latinos, meaning that we are only Latin speaking people. um, is really creating this storm of a conversation. Because what's happening is you have people who, different generation, that extremely conservative, you have a liberal youth movement, you have people from different religions, and of course, still you have an African presence, right? The music, salsa, merengue, cumbia, is all African, right? And it's extreme. We don't say that. We just say it's Latin music, right? And so I share that because we see that in North America as too. All the creative art movements created by African Americans, and so I share that because it will be important as we move forward to know that I will be focusing on different segments of our culture. Sometimes I'll be focused on the African diaspora, speaking of the spiritual, political, financial entity of that history. Same thing with colonization, and also with imperialism, the forever foreign threat. And that one is more of, if you don't know what imperialism is, it's basically a country's expansion around the world, either diplomatically or through military force. And so you can read about it. There was many different empires that grew because of imperialism. And that notion, though, still impacts us today in terms of Latinos being viewed as always a threat. So even when we seek peace, even when we seek asylum, we're still put in detention centers. And only if you know North American history of how our Native American brothers and sisters were also put in boarding schools, families were separated. You see that again in detention centers. Families are separated even though they traveled miles and to seek peace, and now they're incarcerated and separated. And so we see the same history happening, whether it's Native Americans that are federally recognized, or whether we're looking at all the indigenous people of the Southern Hemisphere, mixed or not mixed, that their families are being separated and they're also being detained and incarcerated. So we see the colonial framework again. That's why our history is important. That's why I'm doing this channel, so you can understand why sometimes the news will trigger someone in your office, because if they know history, they see it being repeated. And my hope is that by me sharing little bits and pieces here and there, you can also build this foundation of understanding for yourself, so that you can also be the change we want to see. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon.